It was just another regular day at school, hallways buzzing, lockers slamming, and students trying to get through the day. But no one expected what was about to happen next. In the middle of all the noise and chaos, one boy, known around school for being a loudmouth and pushing people around, decided to mess with the wrong girl. He had a reputation for being a bully, always picking on people who wouldn't fight back. But today, his target wasn't like the others. She was quiet, kept to herself, and didn't bother anyone. But what he didn't know was that behind her calm attitude was a strength he had no idea about. The moment he stepped to her, thinking he was going to embarrass her like he did so many others, everything changed. All eyes turned their way. Phones came out. The hallway got real silent real fast. In just 10 seconds, he learned a lesson he'll never forget, right there in front of everyone. But what exactly happened? And who really is this girl that flipped the whole script on him without breaking a sweat? Let's just say, not all quiet kids are weak, and not every bully walks away laughing. Stick around, because this is one story you'll be telling your friends about. Her name was Amina, new girl, transferred just 2 weeks ago. Most people didn't know much about her, where she came from, what her story was. She walked with confidence but never caused trouble. Sat in the back of class, did her work, and kept her circle small. But you could tell just by looking, there was something different about her. Not in a flashy way, but like she carried herself with purpose. Calm, focused, unbothered. Meanwhile, Marcus, the one who decided to test her, was basically school famous. Not for good reasons, though. Always cracking jokes, pulling stunts, acting like he owned the halls. Teachers were tired of him, but somehow he always slid by with a warning. He liked attention. He liked control. And when he saw Amina not reacting to him like the others, he felt challenged. Word had been spreading that she thought she was tough. That's all it took. Marcus couldn't let it go. He waited until the right moment, after lunch, when the halls were full, when he'd have the biggest audience. He stepped in front of her locker, saying slick things, trying to get under her skin. But here's the thing, Amina didn't flinch. She just looked him dead in the eye. And that's when everything shifted. The energy in the hallway changed. And what happened next? No one saw coming. The hallway was crowded, but it felt like it was just Amina and Marcus in that moment. People had started gathering around, sensing the tension, and pulling out their phones. Some whispered, others barely breathed. Marcus, trying to play it cool, gave Amina a cocky grin. He took a step closer, blocking her way, ready to escalate things. His voice was loud, taunting as if daring her to react. "What's wrong, huh? You gonna stay quiet all day?" He made sure everyone could hear him, eyes flicking over to the small crowd forming behind her. Amina didn't blink. Her eyes were locked on him, steady and calm. No sign of fear, no sign of giving in. It unnerved him, and that was exactly what he didn't expect. He was used to seeing people break, to seeing them get rattled by his words. But she wasn't moving, didn't even flinch when he raised a hand, as if to push her aside. The crowd murmured, the tension thickening. People were starting to realize this wasn't the usual standoff. But then something strange happened. One of the kids in the crowd, a quiet freshman named Leo, looked at Amina and then at Marcus, and his expression shifted. He had been in the background of so many of Marcus's stunts, always too scared to speak up. Today, he was watching closely, almost as if he was waiting for someone to step in, to stop Marcus from getting away with it again. Leo wasn't the only one. The crowd was shifting, slowly but surely. They were tired of the same old routine. And Marcus, feeling the pressure of their eyes, took a step back. He was used to being in control, but for the first time, the power dynamic felt off. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of his downfall, because Amina wasn't going to back down, not today. And whatever he did next, he wasn't going to get away with it. Marcus's eyes flicked nervously around the crowd, trying to gauge what everyone was thinking. The silence in the hallway felt like a pressure cooker, the kind of silence you only get when something is about to explode. He had pushed people around before, always knowing they'd back down. But Amina wasn't like the others. She wasn't backing down, and that scared him. The crowd was growing, people pulling out their phones, whispering, waiting for the showdown they could already sense was coming. It was like watching a live drama unfold. Everyone knew something big was about to happen, but no one knew how it would play out. The seconds stretched longer than usual. Marcus's confidence began to crack, and in that crack, something shifted. Amina was still standing there, cool, calm, collected, but there was a fire in her eyes that no one had seen before. Her hand slid into her pocket, almost casually, but it was enough to make Marcus take a step back, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're tough," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "I've seen tougher girls than you." But Amina didn't respond. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step toward him, closing the gap between them. The hallway felt like it was holding its breath. Every single person watching was waiting for the first move, wondering if Marcus would do something reckless, or if Amina would finally snap. And then, just as he made a move to shove her, something happened. It was so fast, so unexpected, that the crowd didn't have time to react before they saw Marcus on the floor. He was flat on his back, eyes wide, breath caught in his throat. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. It was like the entire school was holding its breath, trying to process what had just happened. The energy in the hallway changed in an instant. The crowd went from watching in shock to murmuring, some laughing under their breath, others too stunned to say anything. But Amina, she stood there, unbothered, not even a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. She simply turned and walked away, her every step carrying a sense of calm power that no one could ignore. Marcus, still on the floor, slowly pushed himself up, but his face was pale, his pride shattered. The crowd was still buzzing, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Marcus wasn't the one in control. He wasn't the one everyone was watching. Amina had stolen the show, and now everyone wanted to know, who exactly was she? What was her story? And how had she just taken down the school's biggest bully without lifting a finger? The unanswered questions hung in the air, and the tension was only just beginning. As Amina walked away, the buzz in the hallway was deafening. Some people were still laughing, others were whispering in disbelief, but everyone was talking about what had just happened. Marcus was still on the ground, clutching his chest, his face a mixture of shock and embarrassment. No one had ever seen him like this. He was the one who always called the shots, the one everyone feared, but in one move, Amina had completely flipped the script. But just as people started to move on, thinking the drama was over, something even bigger happened. A voice broke through the chaos, loud, sharp, unmistakable. It was Mr. Carter, the principal. His face was red with anger as he stormed down the hallway, his eyes locked onto Amina. The crowd went silent. No one had seen him like this before. The last thing anyone expected was the principal to show up and make things even more intense. "What's going on here?" Mr. Carter demanded, his voice booming. He wasn't looking at Marcus anymore. His eyes were fixed on Amina. "This kind of behavior is unacceptable, young lady." Amina stopped in her tracks. For a split second, there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, something the crowd hadn't seen before. Had she expected this? Was she prepared for it? Her calm expression didn't break, but the tension in the air thickened. The principal stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Do you realize what you've done?" he continued, his words heavy with authority. Amina didn't respond right away. The silence stretched on, and just when it seemed like she was going to speak, another voice interrupted. This time it was Leo, the quiet freshman who had been watching everything unfold. He stepped forward, his voice shaking but determined. "Mr. Carter, it wasn't Amina's fault. Marcus started it. He's always starting trouble." The crowd shifted, whispers running through the students like wildfire. For the first time, Leo, someone who'd always been in the background, was stepping up. And as soon as he spoke, the tension exploded. Mr. Carter's gaze shifted from Amina to Leo, then back again. It was clear he wasn't used to students speaking up like this. The eyes of every student in the hallway were locked on them, waiting to see how this would all play out. But before anyone could react, something even more unexpected happened. From behind the principal, a group of older students, some of the toughest in the school, started moving forward. They'd been standing off to the side, watching everything unfold, and now they were stepping in. Their faces were serious, and they weren't looking at Marcus, or even Amina. They were looking at Mr. Carter. And as they moved closer, the tension in the hallway shifted again. The last thing anyone expected was for this to spiral into something bigger than just Marcus and Amina. And with that, the stakes were raised. Now, it wasn't just one bully against one quiet girl. Now, it was the entire school watching to see if they would let something like this slide, or if this would be the turning point that would change everything. The tension in the hallway was palpable, thick enough to suffocate anyone who stood too close. The older students, a group of senior athletes who usually ran the halls with their own sense of authority, were now standing in a loose circle around Mr. Carter. They weren't saying a word, just staring, and it made everyone in the hallway uneasy. The principal's face was tight, his jaw clenched as he glanced at the group and then back at Amina. He hadn't expected this kind of challenge, not from a girl he barely knew, and certainly not from a freshman who had only just found her voice. But just as Mr. Carter opened his mouth to speak, something unexpected happened. Amina stepped forward, her calm gaze never wavering. She didn't look scared or nervous. She looked like someone who had been through much worse than this moment. And then she did something no one in the hallway had predicted. She raised her hand, not in defiance, but in a peaceful gesture. "Mr. Carter, I understand, but I don't want to fight. I don't want to be a problem," Amina said quietly, but everyone heard it. The crowd went silent again, unsure of what to make of it. Was she giving in? Was this the end of the standoff? The principal seemed thrown off, his expression softening for just a split second. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could get a word out, the group of seniors stepped in front of him. One of them, a girl named Sasha, who had always been one of Marcus's strongest supporters, spoke up. "It's not just about her, sir," Sasha said, her voice surprisingly firm. "It's about how we all let this go on for so long. We've all seen Marcus push people around, and no one did anything about it. But this time it was different." The room went still, the weight of Sasha's words hitting harder than anyone expected. For the first time, someone was calling out the truth, the unspoken reality that Marcus wasn't just a troublemaker. He was a symbol of a bigger problem in the school. And now the students who had always been too afraid to speak up were finding their courage. Marcus, who had been standing to the side, still nursing his bruised ego, tried to regain some sense of control. "You're all just gonna let this girl tell you what to do now." He sneered, but the words felt hollow. No one was listening to him. Not anymore. And then Amina did something no one saw coming. She turned back to the crowd, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's not about me," she said, her words cutting through the air. "It's about standing up for what's right. It's about making sure we don't let fear control us anymore." The students, who had been watching in silence, started to shift. They weren't looking at Marcus anymore. They weren't looking at Amina either. They were looking at each other. And for the first time, it was clear. They weren't afraid anymore. They were done with the status quo. But just as it seemed like things were winding down, a final, unexpected twist hit the crowd. From behind Mr. Carter, a familiar face stepped forward, one that no one had seen in weeks. It was Miss Harper, a teacher who had been on a leave of absence. She was the one who had always quietly observed from the sidelines, but now her eyes were locked on Marcus with an intensity no one expected. "I think," she said softly, "it's time we had a real conversation about what's been happening in this school." The entire hallway went dead quiet as the realization hit everyone. Miss Harper had been watching it all along. She knew everything. And with that, the stakes were raised again. because the fight wasn't just between Marcus and Amina anymore. It was about the entire culture of the school, the way things had been allowed to go on for so long. And now it was finally about to change.